I've recently made a poll regarding the 7 deadly sins versus the S-class heroes in my community tab, and I was surprised of how much people wanted me to make this video, but even more surprised of the overwhelming victory the S-class heroes got, with only 23% out of 13,000 voted for the favor of the 7 deadly sins. I actually had to make a pinned comment basically trying to inform you guys that the 7 deadly sins are no pushovers. So in this video, based on the research I've gathered regarding the Nanatsu no Taizai manga, I am going to break down how this would go. So do not forget to full counter the subscribe button and the notification bell for more of these One Punch Man videos. Thank you. The 7 Deadly Sins, aka Nanatsu no Taizai, is a very underrated manga that tragically met its downfall by the hand of Studio Dean. In fact, prior to Season 3, this series was highly popular due to its crazy sense of adventure, really cool characters, and a very creative story. But thanks to the massive drop of quality from Season 3 and on, people just sadly stopped caring about it, and whenever it's brought up in the conversation, it's always regarded as a meme. This is actually the same reason why people don't really realize how strong this verse is. I mean, the very first episodes or chapters shows characters performing feats of not only tremendous strength but actually outstanding precision. Meliodas throws a spear back at Thunder, precisely aiming for his head from several miles away. But nonetheless, in order to truly understand how strong these characters are, you'd need to be tackling the Nanatsu no Taizai manga alongside its really well written sequel that goes by the name of the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse. And when doing the research, I've come across 3 different metas of how strong these characters are. So here's the thing, it all ultimately boils down to 3 7 deadly sins entities: the Demon King, the Supreme Deity, and Chaos. These guys are hands down the strongest characters in the entire series. However, the character with the most quantifiable feats, especially in the first meta, is the Demon King, who actually has 4 separate forms, all scaled to between small planetary to planetary levels of AP. This actually gets derived from the fact that the Demon Lord, while only at 50%, definitely scale above the Behemoth, who is a life spirit residing in the demon realm, capable of exerting gravitational energy relative to that of 30 zetatons of TNT, making him small planetary plus. This is also substantiated by the fact that the Behemoth was able to shake the entire demon realm, potentially tearing it apart. And if you multiply this by 2, the Demon King at full power, which is 100%, would reach the lower end of planetary AP. This scaling is certainly crucial because characters like Bon, Meliodas, King, and Escanor the One were all able to damage various forms of the Demon King, certainly solidifying their position at small planetary plus at minimum. Meanwhile, Marlin with Infinity and Diane scale to the strongest demons Chandler and Cusack, who are small planetary beings due to being superior to Assault Mode Meliodas and full-powered Zeldris. Gother should at least scale to the 10 Commandments, who are moon level, derived from having 1/11th of the Demon King's 50% power. So the 7 deadly sins in the first meta range from moon level to small planetary plus in both attack potency and durability. The second meta exponentially elevates the power scaling even further, primarily through the creation feats demonstrated by the Supreme Deity, the Demon King, and Chaos. Each of these entities has crafted their own dimensions, complete with at least a moon and stars. You see, in Nanatsu no Taizai's manga, this concept is reinforced by Tarmiel, who implies that creation feats directly correlates with the character's power. He specifically states that Mael's ability to escape their dimension means he possesses power equivalent to their own. This logic places the top tiers of the 7 deadly sins at insane levels of power. Not only that, but Meliodas is heavily implied to have surpassed the Demon King by the end of the series, paired with the fact that in the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse, the 7 deadly sins are portrayed as major threats to Chaos himself, reinforcing their standing among the highest tiers, which makes at least the top 3 of them multi-solar system level in terms of attack potency. Now, the third meta, which is completely crazy, introduces even more contentious claims hinging on the purported size of certain realms. This is according to one cover page describing Purgatory as an infinite realm, but this assertion, in my opinion, rests on shaky ground for several reasons. 1. Editor's notes and supplementary material materials are often not considered as canon. And 2. The original Japanese text uses the phrase Hatanaki Kaiyo Guruguru, which technically translates to crossing through an endless or limitless other world, which means the term infinite or Mugen in Japanese is actually never used. However, others would still argue that chaos should be universal for creating the mortal realm, specifically calling it Sekai in the original Japanese text. Sekai can mean planet, the universe, or society depending on the context, and since we know it surely doesn't mean the planet since the Demon Lord and the Supreme Deity created worlds that has stars, then that can only mean the entire universe. Well, I'd like to say that I personally feel like these types of claims demand far stronger substantiation for relying on ambiguous cover pages and a single Japanese word, so we'd only be using the first two metas regarding this video. But anyways, when it comes to speed, things aren't really that hard to quantify. You see, when specifically talking about the speed of light in Nanatsu no Taizai series, the character that comes to mind must always be an archangel called Rudushiel, who has a grace that allows him to move at such speeds, but then still gets blessed by Ominous Nebula, a technique used by Zeldris calculated at 25 times the speed of light. However, it certainly is still an area of effect type of attack and doesn't generally scale to their combat and reaction speed. Zeldris himself literally needed 0.8 seconds to reactivate it, but still got blessed by Rudushiel, so most of these 7 deadly sins should only be faster than light for being able to contend with the Demon King. Now when it comes to abilities, as usual, I find it fit to talk about them in the how would it go section. And with all of this being said, how would these 7 deadly sins deal with One Punch Man's strongest heroes? I've already talked about the One Punch Man heroes in like 4 to 5 videos that you should go and check them out, but I'll still make sure to give a brief summary of how strong they are and what they can do. Only this time, I want to take a different approach, specifically talking about their speeds first. So, the most insane demonstration of travel, combat and reaction speed was showcased in chapter 155 and 156. Platinum S, Flashy Flash and Garu created geometric structure of light covering the sky over Z City. Truly a remarkable feat, but strictly speaking, I personally believe that in this modern era of power scaling, everybody can somehow fight at light speed levels. It reached a point where sometimes it just doesn't feel like that's the case for some particular characters. If I come to you right now and say that Sukuna can fight at the speed of light, some would controversially agree and others would be very skeptical. But if I tell you that Flashy Flash is faster than light, it'd be a very digestible idea because the demonstrations of his feat in the manga are just that clear. Reasons I'm talking about this is because as crazy as this panel is, this feat is only calced at 4 times the speed of light. A very contentious calc with a very contentious number. There obviously exist other countless calcs claiming that there are 25, 100 and even 800 times the speed of light, and that's all due to the existence of one single problem: perspective. These lines can be much smaller than the crater as the moon is much smaller than the sun. This is still without accounting for the statement of nobody being able to know that these were the traces of 3 superhuman beings fighting in the sky, with the term nobody possibly including characters who can already react at crazy levels of speed. You've got Awakened Cockroach claiming he can dodge a light speed attack by precognition but fails to react to one of Orochi's horns, same horns that were dodged multiple times by half monster Garu. There even exists the statement saying that the S-class heroes would have toyed with Orochi in terms of speed if that fight happened, but you can still argue that the idea got retconned. The point I'm trying to make here is that most of the S-class heroes should already be faster than light even without accounting for Genos and Atomic Samurai dodging lasers confirmed to have the properties of light. This idea gets strengthened by the databook statements regarding Stinger and Lightning Genji both having lightning speed attacks considered as fodder in comparison to the S-class heroes. That's of course if you believe that it's not hyperbolic, but nonetheless, the S-class heroes should all have faster than light combat and reaction speeds, with Flashy Flash being implied to being much faster. Now, when it comes to AP, things are in fact pretty simple. If you use the one-shot tier method, you'll actually be able to get characters like Flash and Bang at multi to continental levels of AP, with possibly Atomic Samurai using the Sunblade narratively scaling at similar levels. heroes. You also have Tatsumaki, 10 Seconds Genos, and Pumped Up Metal Bat having the ability to exert multi-continental plus to planetary energy at the very least. Since Tatsumaki, while being nerfed, scales above Psycho Orochi, who scales above Orochi's small planetary kinetic energy or almost moon level potential energy. 10 Seconds Genos was able to match Psycho Orochi's 18 exatons of energy on 2 different times. And Pumped Up Metal Bat straight up damaged Sage Centipede via resonance, a beam that should at least be on par with Psycho Orochi. Not to forget the strongest hero Blast, who is confidently multi-solar system and possibly higher for being able to harm Cosmic Fear Garu and survive the Serious Punch Squared's explosion. Now when it comes to the rest of the S-class heroes, they all generally range from city to island level in terms of attack potency. Darkshine should at least be island level for scaling above Carnage Kabuto, who gets upscaled from Vaccine Man's true form, being at least a one-shot tier than his base form, making him mountain level. Pui Pui Prisoner sits at a lower level for slightly damaging Psycho Orochi, and Tank Top Master should generously be city level, upscaling from the Deep Sea King, tanking Genos' incineration. And with all of this being said, can the S-class heroes ever manage to defeat the 7 deadly sins? So as much as I like the S-class heroes, the 7 deadly sins have so many win conditions it's actually ridiculous. Believe me when I say that the biggest problem the S-class heroes would face isn't the sins' raw strength, but rather it's their absurdly overpowered abilities, which could secure them victory in an instant 1v1 situation against a hero with no prior knowledge. And even if you try to compare their physical power to the S-class heroes, things still wouldn't be on their favor. You see, if you lowball these 7 deadly sins and only consider their first meta of power scaling, then most of them sit at moon to small planetary levels of AP, with Meliodas arguably being far stronger due to his implied superiority over the Demon King, which means the only S-class heroes who can realistically contend with them in a 1v1 scenario are 10 Seconds Genos, Pumped Up Metal Bat, Tatsumaki, and obviously Blast. Others like Silver Fang, Flashy Flash, and Atomic Samurai can hold their own but ultimately fall short against the sins. But here's the catch: what happens when Genos' 10 seconds mode runs out, or when Metal Bat hits his limits? These fighters are surely powerful, but their strength comes with extreme conditions. Silver Fang could still redirect attacks from Diane or Ban, and Flashy Flash might outspeed most of the sins, assuming they don't scale to Ominous Nebula speed. You can also argue that Tatsumaki and Blast can carry the S-class heroes hard to victory, since both could comfortably defeat any sin in a 1v1 battle. And if you believe that these sins are only planetary at best, Blast could technically solo them all by himself. But as I mentioned earlier, that's only if we ignore these sins' hacks and abilities, which literally changes everything. Take Ban for example. Even with his immortality, he still has Zero Sign, which lets him move undetected, allowing him to assassinate opponents effortlessly, paired with Hunter Fest, which absorbs and drains his enemy's physical energy, allowing him to overpower previous relative opponents. And then you have King, whose spear petrifies anyone it impales, literally considered as an instant win con against most heroes. Not to mention Merlin, who is the personification of abilities in the Nanatsu no Taizai series. She can amplify her allies, use Perfect Cube to trap and reflect attacks from any of the S-class heroes, teleport to any location, and can make any magical spell last for eternity. But the most problematic member when it comes to abilities is none other than Gother. You see, most of Gother's abilities are considered as an instant win con. You have Nightmare Teller, where he traps you in a nightmare with the possibility of never waking up, induces visions amped with the user's traumatic memories. Just imagine Darkshine being trapped in an illusion, replaying his memories of getting absolutely demolished by Garu, Vomited Fury Ugly, and Golden S. That'd be very funny to see. And even if they escape, they're left mentally broken and physically exhausted. He can also manipulate and implant non-existent memories, paired with the ability to literally control his opponents, making them his allies in an instant. I gotta say that this character just has so many abilities that just fatherizes a lot of heroes. He's simply somebody he needs to be dealt with immediately in a battle royale situation. Now here's the thing, the S-class heroes might stand a chance against these 7 deadly sins in their first meta. Nothing prevents Blast from blitzing them or banishing them to another dimension, although Merlin could potentially have an answer to that equation, but the fact still remains that Blast is significantly stronger than small planetary energy beams, and assumably having resisted god level manipulation, he'd likely counter Gother's abilities as well if he ever managed to tag him with his arrows in the first place. However, in the second meta, where characters like Meliodas and Current Bond reach multi-solar system, a comparable level to Blast via creation feats, the odds would certainly shift dramatically. While I still believe that Blast could still compete with his superior speed if you don't scale them to Ominous Nebula and don't stack up speed from Gother's arrows being stated as light, his chances of victory still diminish significantly. The pre-Rakon chapters suggest he might be far stronger and faster, but currently we're left with him at multi-solar system level, putting him on par with top-tier Sins. The situation becomes even more dire if we consider the controversial third meta where some Sins reach universal levels. But as I said, this needs more evidence than just the usage of a word and a questionable chapter cover. So if it's all the S-class heroes versus the 7 deadly sins in an open field, just the heat emitting from Escanor's presence would make it difficult for Silverfang to use the Awakening Breath and would just melt most of the low S-class heroes, allowing them to fight with even numbers. But in a nutshell, the only character that can compete with top tier sins is Blast. In a 1v1 fight against them, he can certainly win, but would still be a very competitive fight. But on a battle royale situation, these sins are much more organized, battle tested, and have many overwhelming surprising abilities that would catch most of the S-class heroes off guard. They're just much stronger than most of the S-class heroes, as I can confidently say that most of these sins would demolish characters like Tactile Master, Puri Prisoner, Child Emperor, Zombie Man, Darkshine, Pig God, and Drive Knight. The only characters that can somehow compete are still very vulnerable against these 7 deadly sins abilities, with only Blast with his superior speed being the only one who can stand a chance against them. Thank you so much for watching, and please consider subscribing. Thank you.